Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed Aleph in Bava Basra. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. And we are continuing our discussion of chazaka, specifically the idea that the occupation of a piece of property for 3 years will allow you to not have any definitive proof of your ownership. All you need to do is prove that you were there, and that will be sufficient. And so that will create a valid claim of ownership. That together with a valid claim of ownership, meaning I bought it from you, I inherited it. All of that will be sufficient so that you can have a presumption that the one holding the property is actually the legitimate owner of the property. And so we're going to pick up with the end of the first line of Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, with another set of conflicting claims. And really today, we're going to deal with two situations, two conflicting claims, and we're going to take a look at them, and that will be our day. So we're going to have, it's going to be mostly Rabba, Abaye, and do we have a little of Rabba, Abaye, and Rava? So Rabba was the teacher, Abaye was the student, and Rava and Abaye often have arguments. Usually the halachas like Rava. We'll see what the story is today. Okay.
Mostly.
What? No, nobody
No
else.
spoilers.
No spoilers. All right. So Zomer Shalavosai, Vizomer Shalavosai. So each one, so the first person who's in the land says, this land belonged to my ancestors. And the other one says, this one land belonged to my ancestors. Hi, Aitisade de Avasehu. So the first one brings that so the first one actually is the one who's not on the land, and he brings witnesses that actually his ancestors own the land. V'hai Aisisade de Achla Shnei Chazaka. And the other one says, brings witnesses that he was there for the number of years necessary for a chazaka. Again, 3 years according to the Chachamim, potentially a smaller period according to the other positions in our Mishnah. We're going to just, again, usually we mean 3 years because that's the position that we follow. So Amar Rabbo, so Rabbo says, okay, so what's the law? Mali l'shaker. What reason is there for the person who has the chazaka to lie? Because Ibai Amar Le minach zivanta of achalta shnei chazaka. Because if, in fact, the person who's on the land said, I bought it from you and I have a chazaka, he would certainly win. So we should allow him to win when he changes his words. This is based on the concept called migo. Migo means since I could have said something that would allow me to win, you should believe me when I say what I'm saying and allow me to win.
Even though it's the lesser argument.
Even though it's a lesser argument, exactly. So Amarle Abaye asks a very important question. Mali l'shakar b'mkom edim lo amrinan. How can you say that we say this migo, Rabba, my teacher? Because of course we have this concept that if you say something that is contradicted by witnesses, we don't believe you. So if I were to say, so if I say that you should, again, in this particular instance, we can use the question here. I'm the one who's on the land, and again, Stan is the one. Well, I think we had it the reverse the other way, so we'll have it again. Stan's on the land, and he's saying that it was his ancestors, and I'm on the. I'm saying it was my ancestors, and I bring witnesses that say it was my ancestors. So your statement is contradicting my witnesses effectively. And so as a result, we can't believe that statement any longer because it's being contradicted. So as a result, how could we believe it? So that's what Abaye is asking. And so let's take a look both at Tosos and at Rashi. It's worth spending a little time on this. So Amar Le, Talmido Abaye, his student Abaye, Mali l'shaker. When it comes to this concept of why would I lie, Kolomer al yedei migo, that based on this concept of, since I could have said this, I will, you believe me that I said this, Damali l'shaker, that since I don't have any reason to lie, lo yizaka bekarka, he should not actually get the property. Sharei edim mekachishim as dvarav, because the witnesses that I have are contradicting him. Because you, Stan, were saying that it was your ancestors. I've got witnesses that it was my ancestors. So it can't have been your ancestors. Sha'omrim deshel avosav, because it's because they are saying that it was belonged to their ancestors. The idach because it was the other ones. The gam hachazaka ain't a klum. And so as a result, your chazaka, even though these witnesses can prove that you were there for 3 years, Sharei ein ima taina ki im taina sheker. Once, in order for your claim to be a valid claim that combines with the 3 years, you need to have a valid claim. You can't lie. Right. If you're lying and I can prove you're lying, it doesn't make a difference that you've been there for 3 years. So again, if somebody were to say that they were on that they bought the property from you, and that and they were there for 3 years, if you can prove that they were lying, then you would be able to, then that would not be a valid claim. The halacha ka'abaye, and the halacha is like Abaye, shaharei rabba hodolo kedemuchak va'azo. This is something that the Rashbam will do that Rashi didn't do too much, is to tell us who he thinks the halacha is like.
Rashi, which Tosfos is this? I'm sorry, which Tosfos?
This is not Tosfos. This is
Rashbam. You said Tosfos. Look at Tosfos. I'm looking.
No, I said we are going to look at Rashbam and Tosfos is what I said.
Well, I thought, okay.
Okay, so I may have said Rashi, in which case that's just because I'm getting used to the fact that we're doing Rashbam. But in any event, this was the last wide line in Rashbam at the top of the page, Amar Lei. That was the Rashbam that we just did. So that is Rashbam. Rashbam provides us with a better understanding of Abaye's comment. Now, Mali, let's take a look at the third Tosfos on the daf. Mali l'shaker b'makom edim lo amrinan. Tema l'Rashba. The Rashba has a very important question. Why do you have to say that actually this is contradictory? Nema shel avosav haisa yom echad. Why can't it be that when Stan said that it belonged to his ancestors, he didn't mean that it belonged to his ancestors time immemorium. He meant it belonged to my ancestors for 1 day. Maybe it was my dad's for 1 day. That was all he meant. V'nemar shalakha me'avosav daha. Daha toanin yoresh umaminan lay. Because that if it maybe, and what he's saying is that his ancestors bought it from my ancestors, and we would believe that because there is this idea that if Stan were to have just said that he inherited it, so then we would believe him. It would be sufficient for him to say that his ancestors lived there for 1 day. That because that would be a good migu to say that we're going to believe you. And moreover, as we're going to see, that when we're going to see in a case that is going to come up very shortly, it's the next case we're going to deal with, or the next part of this case that we're going to deal with, we're going to see that the Nahardaim, who say that people don't change their claims, will admit that if in this case the guy were to come back and say, actually, what I meant, that when Stan it comes back and he says, no, just to clarify, when I said it belonged to my ancestors, I meant it belonged to my ancestors for 1 day because they bought it from your ancestors. That we allow Stan to make that change. Even though he's not claiming to have bought it directly. Ella Amar Shadaru Ba Yom Echad. He's just saying that they were there for 1 day. Ana Te'inanle. We will make the claim for him. But Omer Rabbeinu Yitzchak. So now, what is the answer? So Rabbeinu Yitzchak provides the explanation.
So what is that? 1 day? That's insignificant. I mean, that
What?
was what 1 day could have been what 1 day 20 years ago. What that's insignificant. One
Well,
day.
no. So let's clarify this. The very good question. So the point is that if Stan says, I inherited it from my ancestors who bought it from your ancestors, and my ancestors were there for 1 day, now that he becomes in the world of inheritance, we will make the claim that his ancestors had a legitimate claim to the property. And now if you are trying to, if I'm the one who's trying to take it away from Stan. If I want to say it was my ancestors, that's not enough. I need to either show that his ancestors stole it or did something that they weren't there legitimately. And until I can do that, the fact that his ancestors were there, even for 1 day, we will make the claim on his behalf, on Stan's behalf, that they purchased it from me. So that is in fact a halakha that it's a way of providing a benefit to the children of, to orphans, basically to anybody whose parents pass away, because children do not always know the business of their parents when the parents pass away. And so as a result, in order to facilitate inheritance and prevent people from coming in and saying, oh, your parents stole that from me and you have no idea, so as a result you have to lose all your possessions, we don't want that to happen. And so as a result, we protect people who are inheriting property in this way.
So they inherited it and they bought it? You're saying they inherit when you said
yes, we're saying no, Stan is the inheritor.
Right.
The ancestors, when he says it belonged to his ancestors, it means that he inherited the property. And we are going to say that it must be that in order to make Stan's statement consistent with my witnesses who say that my ancestors used to own it, we're going to say that it must be that Stan's ancestors bought it from my ancestors. And for me to take that property away from Stan, who has a chazaka on it, we're going to say I need to counter the proof that his ancestors bought it from my ancestors.
So wait, his ancestors bought it and I inherited, and whatever I inherited.
You're not Stan inherited it.
Okay, Stan, doesn't matter. But his ancestors, whose ancestors inherited it? Yours?
My ancestors owned it. My ancestors owned it from 500 years ago, 700 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Right.
And I have proof, and I've got witnesses to every generation that it's been passed down, and Mark and Charlie are my witnesses that I've owned it forever. All right. And now Stan has been in the land for 3 years. And rather than saying that he bought it from me, he says that he inherited it from his parents. So as a result, what are we going to say? Well, he inherited it. And he has proof that he inherited it. He has witnesses that say that his parents were there for 1 day. And so now, as a result, he wins the case, even though he's not made a claim of purchasing, he's made a claim of inheritance. That is sufficient for him to win. So what's the question? Let's back up because we're in the middle of Tosfos. The question is why don't we say that here? Why, in the very beginning of our discussion, aren't we going to say, when Stan says it belonged to his ancestors, and I say it belonged to my ancestors, Stan then brings witnesses. Why don't we read into this discussion the fact that maybe what Stan meant was that his ancestors owned it for a day? And we're going to see that, no, Stan has to actually make that claim. We won't make that claim for him. Notwithstanding the fact that if he made that claim, it would be a valid claim. Notwithstanding the fact that if he just said, I inherited it and my parents were there for a day, that would be a sufficient claim. Because his words were, it was my ancestral land. As a result, Rabbah says we're not going to believe him. And the Tosfos' question is, every other aspect of this conversation seems to suggest that we should believe him, and we should make the argument even on his behalf. So now we get to the Omer Rabbeinu Yitzchak in the middle of that Tosfos. So Omer Rabbeinu Yitzchak, the Shel Avosai Mashma Shahaisa Olam Shel Avosai. The point is that until Stan clarifies what he meant by it was his ancestors' land, it's as if he said it was my ancestral land from time immemorial. And as a result, it's not enough we can't then undermine his statement. His statement is being contradicted by the witnesses that I'm bringing. And that is why we're treating this as a considered b'makom edim. V'lo shelakhu ad, and it's not that he bought it or they bought it. Ad sheyiparish, until he actually explains bidvarav with his words what he means. Ulakaman denakat shelakhu. And when we say that he then claims that his ancestors acquired it, and we don't need him to know that he's acquired it. It's sufficient for him to say that I saw my ancestors live there for one day. So as a result, I'm going to say maybe they bought it from your parents, b'mishpat in the judgment, v'toan in liyorish, and as a result, we're going to thereby make a claim on Stan's behalf. So once he gets himself into the parsha of as an inheritor, and not that he, in a way that does not contradict the two witnesses that I'm bringing, then he's going to win. But until then, it's as if he said it was my ancestors from time immemorial, and since I brought witnesses that says it was my property from time immemorial, his claim cannot be believed. So as a result, now we're going to refine the case a little bit more.
Sorry, I'm still a little confused where the purchase took place. If each one claims that they inherited,
that's exactly the point. 100%. Right now, we don't have any claim of purchase, and as a result, that's why Stan loses. Even though Stan was on the property and had it for 3 years, Stan is going to lose because exactly of the point that you made. There is no obvious purchase that he says that he made or that he says that his ancestors made. But give me 2 seconds and you will see that the facts are about to change. So Hadar Amarle. So now Stan comes back and says, in the Avascha Sachi. Yes. Oh, no. I did not mean to imply that this property did not belong to your ancestors. You're right that it belonged to your ancestors. Uzvinta Minayu. And I bought it from them. V'hai de Amri Loch de Avase. And that which I said it was my ancestors, to samachli Allah Havasi. It was as if my ancestors, I feel such connection to this land that it was as if my ancestors. So essentially, even though, of course, it could be that Stan is just totally lying through his teeth, but I don't think he is. But it could be that that's the case. We are going to believe him because now he has explained away his words. He's explained his words in a manner that says that, you know what? It is consistent with what I'm saying. I'm not changing my story. I am explaining how my words are consistent with my story. And now my story has a purchase in it. Exactly what Ken was pointing out we didn't have. And so now Stan can win. So as a result, even though Abaye thought, Rabbah thought he was going to win a beginning, and then Abaye pointed out, no, he shouldn't win. Now that we've got a purchase, he can win again. So as a result, so Toin, Choser, Toin. So now the question is,
so how can he claim that it was his ancestors if he's the one who purchased it?
He explained, he said it was his ancestors because he feels so certain of his ownership that it was as if his ancestors were there.
Well, that's not the same thing.
That's true, but now he's explaining his words. You're absolutely right. It's not the same thing. And that it is a push, right? It's not as easy. There are claims that he could have made, and we'll see shortly, that are even easier. And so as a result, but we're going to believe him. So, but before we get to the belief, the question that the Gemara needs to ask right now is Toin v'choser v'toin. 1 second. Hold on just a moment. you've just done a one claim. Stan has made one claim initially. He said it was my ancestors. And then he went back and he made another claim. Oh, when I said it was my ancestors, what I meant is that I'm confident in my own ownership because I bought it as if it was my ancestors. Do we allow that? So that's the machloka. So Ula Amar, Toin Choser Toin. Ula says, absolutely, you 100% will allow that. Nahardai Omre, but the people from Nahardai say, Ain Toin Choser Toin. We don't allow people to come back and make a claim. Umodi Ula. Now we're going to have comments in both directions. We're going to clarify that sometimes Ula will tell you, no, there is just no way we're going to let you come back from that claim. If in fact Stan had said, shall avosai velo shall avosecha, if Stan in his initial opening statement had said, this land was my ancestral land and it was never your ancestral land, and now I bring witnesses that say it was my ancestral land, there is no way. We're not going to allow Stan to change his claim because he was 100% contradicting my witnesses. And we're not going to let him reread it. We're not going to let him do it in that situation. Vehecha dehava kai beidina velotan. Now, on the other hand, and where the person was standing in the courtroom, and again, he goes, Stan says it was my ancestral land. I bring witnesses and say it was my ancestral land. So now his position was contradicted. But usum our brivaton, and then he goes outside, and now he comes back, and he makes a new claim. Ain't a closer for towing. We're not going to let him make a new claim. So there are two situations where where Ula says no claim, no new claims. Situation number one, direct and 100% contradiction. If it's not just a reread, but an absolute, there's no way you can possibly have said what you said without meaning a contradiction of my witnesses, we're not going to let you go back. And the second thing is that if you make a claim and only after you leave court you come back and make a claim, we're not going to let you make that claim either. And my taima, tante agmare, because it was taught to him the claim. What Rashbam, second wide line at the second of the medium lines in the towards the bottom of the page. Oh, Avav v'krovav. We're worried about his friends and family. His friends and family were likely the source of telling him this new great idea. Okay, so that is Ula. Ula says usually you can make a new claim, but there are two situations where you can't. Naharda is the opposite. Umodu Nahardai. Nahardai say, Heichad Amrle shall avosai shalakua me'avosecha. If in fact Stan, instead of claiming that it was that I bought it and I feel so confident like it was like my parents, that's a stretch. So that's where there's debate between Ula and Nahardai. But if Stan had instead said that it was my ancestors who bought it from your ancestors, and so yes, our statements are completely consistent with one another, then the Choser V'Toin, he can even the Nahardaim would allow Stan to come back and make the new claim. V'Hecha Ishtai Mila Abrai, and if in fact Stan and I were arguing about it outside of court, and he never once mentioned this concept of being so confident in his ownership that it was like he purchased it from me, and he was just saying it was my ancestors because he was so confident. And outside the courtroom, he keeps telling me it was my ancestral land. It was my ancestral land. And now Velotan, and he never made the claim that he bought it from me until the Asala Beidina Vatan. And now he comes into court. And now in court, he says, oh, yes, I may have said some other things outside of court, but now we're in court. And I'm going to tell you what really happened. And what really happened is I bought it from you, is what Stan says. Well, in that situation, we're going to let him do it because outside of court is nothing. Outside of court is just commentary. It's just street comments, right? The point is that You don't have to. You don't have to show your best defense on the street. Now, it's interesting.
But
Stan here
isn't
it's
it
important.
going?
Give me just 1 second, Ken. One more comment. It's important to note here that Stan is the defendant because I'm trying to take it away. I'm trying to say this was my ancestral land, and I'm trying to take it away from Stan, who has the chazaka. Stan is the defendant. The defendant does not need to make his true claims outside of court. The according to many Rishonim and Achronim, the plaintiff, in order to take him to court, does need to tell the Stan what the claim is. So I do need to tell the claim. So it's just to clarify that that's not a universal concept. Okay, so now,
So
Question?
Ken,
yes, if he has if he now claims that he bought it, don't we machayev him to bring a raya that he brought? Where's the proof of sale?
there's no proof of sale. He has proof of chazaka. He has proof of 3 years. 3 years of occupation plus a valid claim of purchase is sufficient for him to win the case. That's exactly what chazaka does. Chazaka is he doesn't need the proof.
Right, but that's in makom she'ein edim. The other fellow has edim.
No, what are my witnesses? My witnesses aren't witnesses that say that that they were with me at all times and know for a fact that I never sold the property to Stan. Those witnesses are just that it belonged to my ancestors. There's nothing contradicted by Stan's claim with my witnesses. My witnesses are just saying that I originally was the owner. It doesn't mean that I am the owner today. Okay, Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are occasions where we do pay attention to things that are said outside of court. I don't think for property law, but for discrediting someone, we sometimes do listen to rumors.
Oh, absolutely. And you're making, first of all, you're making a second good point, because obviously, if in fact there was a direct contradiction or an admission against interest that Stan makes outside of court, that would be potential evidence that I could bring. So you're right that you have to be very careful when we say that what Stan's defenses outside of court do not bind him in once he comes into court. He can't. It's still true that his new defense can't contradict and be a total lie relative to what he said before, because otherwise I have his earlier statements and then he's lying and now we don't believe him. So you're absolutely right that statements outside of court, we're just talking about where there's not necessarily any inconsistency. And again, this was the position of the Nardai. Let's take a look and see what they say in connection with that. So again, okay. So again, so why, my timer, why is it that we're going to allow the person to come back and make the claim? It's because we'll let people that people regularly don't show their hand until they get to court. So Amar Meimar, so now we get to the halacha.
No discovery process.
What was that?
No discovery process.
Correct. No discovery process ahead of time. Well, maybe only in court there's a discovery process, meaning, right? So you have to have actually brought the case in order to have discovery. So Amar Meimer Ana Nardai Nana. I'm from Nardai. Usfirli the Toin Choser Toin. Even though my neighbors all think that you don't, I believe that you do. And the halakha is towing because of a towing. You can actually come back and make a new claim. Again, it's important to note that the ULA's restrictions would still seem to apply, meaning if you are going to be directly contradicting something, you can't change and make a lie into the truth. You can't. That's not okay. But if you clarify, that is certainly permitted. Okay, so that was all case number 1, and now, well, let's.
I just want to one clarification, please.
Yes, please.
What was the? I'm still confused about the Havamina in the beginning where Tosfos said there was a sale. What was that? If there was a discussion about Yerusha, how's the
Okay, so Tosfos, it wasn't a Havamina, that it was Tos. Well, I guess part of a Havamina. So Tosfos's Havamina was, how come we are saying that this statement of "it was my ancestral land" is considered contradicted by the witnesses, by Stan's statement of "it was my ancestral land" is contradicted by my witnesses who prove that it was my ancestral land.
I'm just confused how the concept of the Kinyan got involved, the sale.
Right, because so Tosfos is so it's important to understand Tosfos' question, because you can't take a look at what Tosfos then cites without understanding the question. Tosfos' question is, why don't we read into Stan's statement it was his ancestral lands something that would allow him to have a valid claim? And we can see that there are two situations where we do that. First of all, according to the Nardaim, if Stan were to actually explicitly say that what he meant was my forefathers bought it from your forefathers, everybody agrees that he could come back and make that claim. So the question that Tosfos is asking is, why are we saying his original words were contradicted when there are words that he could say now that would make it as if his words weren't contradicted and we would allow him to win? So why not still say this concept of Migo? And Tosfos says that still the simple read of his words of "it was my ancestral land" mean it was my ancestral land forever. So although we will allow him to clarify and step back a little bit from that statement, at the moment, until he actually does so, it feels too much of a contradiction that we're going to consider it as if he's contradicted witnesses. And what we said in that regard is this case, right? This case of that we just cited, where the Nahardaim admit that if Stan came back and said, "my forefathers bought it from your forefathers," instead of saying, "I bought it from you," and just feel so confident that it was as if my forefathers bought, that there's a nonsensical aspect of that claim. And even though, of course, Ula and the Halakha says we're going to allow you to make that claim because it's still not directly contradicted. You've explained it away, and we're going to allow you to go forward. So that's what's going on.
So
and
was he initially saying in Tosfos, as his interpretation, that my forefathers bought it from your forefathers, and therefore I inherited from my forefathers?
Yes, that's exactly right. That everybody agrees that if Stan says that that's what happened, even if he said originally it was my ancestral land, implying that it was from time immemorial, we will let him win. Everybody agrees with that.
And he's my ancestral land, but my ancestors bought it from your ancestors.
Correct. Everybody will agree that if Stan makes that claim, he wins. However, if Stan stays pat on "it was my ancestral land" and doesn't make that further clarification, once I bring witnesses that it was my ancestral land, he is going to lose.
Right. Well, he has no proof that his ancestors brought it from your ancestors.
Correct. He doesn't even claim that. So, okay. So now we have case number 2. All right. Case number 2. So the Gemara considers a similar dispute, but where the parties both had witnesses that they had a chazaka. And one set of witnesses also is testifying about the property having been owned by the claimant's ancestors. So Zeh Omer Shalabosai, I come into Stan's land and stands in the land property, and I say it belonged to my ancestors. Zeh Omer Shalabosai, and Stan says, no, it was my ancestors, and he's been here for 3 years. I brought witnesses that showed that it belonged to my ancestors. I'm sorry. So Stan brings witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors, and it belonged, and he was there for 3 years. And I only bring witnesses that I was there for 3 years. So we both claim and have witnesses that we were there for the last 3 years. So exactly, somebody is lying, 100%. Let's take a look at Rashbam. Last of the medium-wide lines in the Rashbam on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. V'hai aiti sadi de achla shnei chazaka otan shalosh shanim atzman shehedu elu harishonim. That for the same 3 years that the first set of witnesses say that Stan was there, my witnesses say that I was there. Aleihem. Ubo elu vehechishrim. And so as a result, my witnesses are directly contradicting Stan's witnesses. So Amar Rav Nachman, Oki achila lavahade achila. We're going to put one usage of the land against the other usage of the land. V'oki ara b'cheskes avasa. But Stan had witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors. I didn't have witnesses that belonged to my ancestors. So even though his witnesses were contradicted by my witnesses, we're going to let him win. Amrle Rava.
So each person has witnesses, right?
Each person has witnesses. My witnesses say I was there for the last 3 years. And again, I make the claim that it was my ancestral land, but I don't have witnesses to that. Stan says it was his ancestral land and he had a chazaka, and he has witnesses, one set of witnesses that say both. Now, again, remember that my witnesses contradicted his witnesses with respect to one element of his claim. So Amrle Rava says, these are contradicted witnesses, and therefore we shouldn't believe them. Amrle nehi de iskash ba'achilta. So Rav Nachman said back to Rava, no, listen, they were only contradicted with respect to the usage of the land, as we turn to Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. But avaza mi is chashash. But were they contradicted at all with respect to the ancestral aspect of it? No, they weren't. So as a result, that testimony can stand. So Lema Rava Rav Nachman beplukta de Rav Huna v'Rav Chisda kamiflagi. Maybe Rava and Rav Nachman are arguing about something that Rav Huna and Rav Chisda argued. De Itmar, because we have the following statement: Shnei pite edim hamakhishu said zo it's zo. We have two sets of witnesses that contradict one another. Amar Rav Huna zo ba v'fnei atzma umeida v'zo ba v'fnei atzma umeida. Now, what happens in a new case? Those same two witnesses, again, the two witnesses in our case, now come and testify that a contract that Charlie has with Ken is a valid contract. Are they considered good witnesses or not good witnesses? So Rav Huna says, of course they're good witnesses. We might know that one of them are lying, but we don't know which one. And so as a result, we're going to allow them to remain in their original chazaka of being kosher witnesses. And so again, we'll allow them to be witnesses. The Rav Chisda, and okay, so let's take a look at Rashbam, the Zo Ba'a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down in the narrow lines on Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. The Zo Ba'a, Be'edus Acheres, in a totally different testimony. Aval echad, but by the way, echad mikatzu, the echad mikatzu, if one of my witnesses combines with one of Stan's witnesses and they go to testify, aim at starfin la'edus achad. They can't testify together because we know that one of them was a liar in our case, in the case between Stan and me. Daha echad mehem puzzle, one of them is invalid. Bivadai, certainly. Ve'ein kan ela chatzi edus. And so as a result, all you have is a 50% edus. V'tam de Rav Huna, and the reason of Rav Huna, mishum de oki gavra achazke. We're going to, a person is established according to the nature, their prior nature, what they have a chazaka of being. This is a different kind of chazaka, again, highlighting the multiple uses of the term chazaka. Velotif salinu minei misafik, and there's nothing that has taken him out of the suffix category. So even though we're uncertain whether he's a valid witness, we're going to maintain his validity until we are certain about it being invalid. The Rav Chisda and Rav Chisda,
well, we just said he's invalid because we knew he lied in the other case.
We don't know. We know one of the sets of witnesses lied. We don't know which one. The Rav Chisda Amar, this is the fifth line, end of the line, back in the Gemara. Rav Chisda says, no, Bahadi Sade Shakre Lamali. Once I know that they might be liars, why should I even take any chances? And as a result, I'm not going to even have them at all. They cannot testify even in another case. It's a very powerful lesson that when you testify in one case, even though you may be 100% telling the truth and other people are coming in to lie, now, according to Rav Chisda, you will never be able to testify again because of those other liars. In any event, Lema Rav Nachman de Amar Rav Huna. So it seems like Rav Nachman agrees with Rav Huna that we allow the testimony. Rava Rav Chisda, and Rava would agree with Rav Chisda. So actually, we can say not that way. Aliba de Rav Chisda Kuli Amalo Pligi. Now everybody agrees that clearly Rav Chisda would not allow, would not agree with Rav Nachman's ruling. But Rav Nachman would say that he's following Rav Huna. And why would Rav Chisda disagree with Rav Nachman's ruling? Because Rav Chisda would say, these two witnesses, we're not going to believe them about anything. So certainly in this own case where they testify about the ancestral land piece, we're not going to believe them. So there, everybody agrees. Ki pligi, where is there a disagreement? But Aliba de Rav Huna. Rava and Rav Nachman are even arguing according to Rav Huna. Rav Nachman ka Rav Huna. Rav Nachman clearly is like Rav Huna. He's saying that we believe the witnesses in other situations, and we'll believe them here. We'll believe them with respect to their testimony about the ancestral ownership. The Rava says no. Ad kan lo kama Rav Huna ela b'edus acheres. When Rav Huna says that the witnesses in our case, the case between me and Stan, where they have contradicted with respect to the chazaka, and Stan's witnesses also testified to the fact that it was his ancestral land, even Rav Huna would say that we don't accept that. Because when Rav Huna said that we'll allow these witnesses to testify, he only means in a new case. About la'osa edus, in that same testimony, in that same case, no, we're low. We're not going to accept them, period. And so as a result, everybody can, both Rava and Rav Nachman can be consistent with Rav Huna, who of course is how the halacha is. So
he doesn't puzzle them in another case.
Correct. Correct.
Because that was what the Rashbam said, right?
Exactly. Rashbam was explaining Rav Huna. So exactly.
That they wouldn't be puzzled because he didn't.
Because even though there's an uncertainty about them, we won't take them out of the category of believability. However, Rava says that while we won't take them out of the category of believability when it comes to a new case, even Rav Huna would agree that in a situation where they're testifying about the same matter, we're not going to believe them because it was in this matter where we're uncertain who's telling the truth and who's not. So Hadar Aitu Sadeh Da'avasehi. So now, again, Stan had witnesses that he...
And when you think about it, it's a little bit difficult to develop the chronology here, because if you're saying another case, but that refers to this case, and they're not allowing them to testify in this case, but based on another case that may or may not have happened yet.
No. There's no issue of chronology. First of all, you make an important point that's worth noting. Certainly, every testimony that they had up until this point is a valid testimony. We will not go back and question the every.
Oh, you're talking about a prior testimony. I'm thinking about something forward, in another case forward.
I understand. So if you let me finish,
Okay.
So the point is that certainly when it comes to historical testimony, we're not going to question anything that they do. So now the question is about the future testimony. So that's the argument between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Rav Huna says certainly we're going to believe them in those future testimony because they're not definitively contradicted. And according to Rav Chisda, no, why should we bother with people who might be liars? Huh. And then the debate that we have between Rava and Rav Nachman, which can be a debate within Rav Huna's position, is, does Rav Huna say his position with respect to this case itself? When it comes to the case in which we have the contradictory testimony, will we allow those witnesses to testify about another matter in this case? Or do we say in this case itself, because they have been contradicted, there's going to be a problem? So that's the issue. Now, we've now ruled, Rav Nachman ended up ruling for Stan, because Stan, again, had witnesses about Chazaka and had witnesses about ancestry. I only had witnesses about Chazaka, and so as a result, the fact that his witnesses also covered ancestry allowed Stan to win. But you know what? I realized, hey, I know that Moshe and Charlie actually know that it was my ancestral land. So now let's take a look. Hadar aiti sade de avasehi. I now come and bring witnesses that it also was my ancestral land. So Amar Rav Nachman, Ana achtine, we set up the person, meaning that we gave it to Stan. Anamaskin, like we can take it away. And so Rashbam explains second to last narrow line, end of the line, Anamaskin, like Kilomer lo nechzik yoter mizeh. Neither of them now have any greater claim. Now all their testimony is exactly equal. So that is what Rav Nachman says. Lizilusa de Beidina lo chayshinan, and we're not worried about the fact that the Beis Din changed its mind. So Masav Rava B'itema Rabbi Zera. So Rava said, or some people was Rav Zera. 1 second. What about the following brisa? Shnayim omrim meis. 2 people say that a husband died. Ushnayim omrim lo meis, and 2 people say that he didn't die. Shnayim omrim niskarsha. 2 people say they divorced. Ushnayim omrim lo niskarsha. 2 people say she was not divorced. So harezo lo tinaseh. So she's not allowed to marry because we have 2 conflicting witnesses, and as a result, we're unsure as to what her situation is. The imneses lo teitze. The Tanna Kama says that if she does get married, we won't force her to divorce. Rabbi Menachem, Rabbi Yossi Omer, teitze. No, even if she were to actually get married, we need to force her to leave. Amar Rabbi Menachem, Rabbi Yossi, Amosayani Omer teitze. When do I say that she has to leave? Bisman shebo edim va'achar kachnisis. Only where the witnesses that said that she's not divorced or that her husband didn't die came before she got married. But if in fact she got married and then the contradictory witnesses came, then we'll say that she doesn't leave. Why? Do we not force her to leave when these contradictory witnesses came? Presumably, it's because we don't want, we're worried about Zilusa de Beidina. We're worried about the embarrassment of the court, that if they're going to have ruled it one way and then ruled a different way. So Amarle, and so how can you, Rav Nachman, change your ruling in this case? So Amarle, Rav Nachman says to Rava, either Rava or Rabbi Zera, Ana Sirile Lemebad Uvda. I was thinking to do something here, meaning to take it away from Stan. Hashta to Osivtan at, now that you've got this challenge, V'osvan Rav Hamnuna B'Surya, and Rav Hamnuna made a similar challenge from in Surya. Lo Avdin and Ba'uvda, I'm not going to do anything about it, meaning I'm going to leave it with Stan. Well, Nafak, 1 second. But then Rav Nachman went out, and Ovid Uvda, he took the land away from Stan. Man dechaza, if somebody saw it, savar teuzahi biyade, they would have thought that he made a mistake, the lohi. But actually, he didn't make a mistake from taking it away from Stan and putting it essentially in the middle, saying that neither of us have made a good claim. Elamishum detalia ba'ashle ravrave, because he actually had a strong ropes on which to rely. So what exactly were those strong ropes? So for that, you're going to need to stay tuned. Oh, I'm sorry for not scrolling. Stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. So I wish everybody a Shabbat.
So he took it away from him. First, he said it was his. Then he took it away because the witnesses weren't valid.
No, because we're unsure which witnesses are valid. The bottom line is that now, in the end, Stan has 2 witnesses that say he has a chazaka and it was his ancestral land, and I have 2 witnesses who say I had the chazaka and it was my ancestral land. So as a result, we've got 2 witnesses against 2 witnesses. We don't know who's correct. And as a result, we're going to hold the land effectively in abeyance until either of us is able to bring better proof. But, and so that's where things currently stand. But what was Rav Nachman's basis for not accepting Rava's point, either Rava's point or Rabbi Zera's point, that we should be worried about the disgrace of the court? For that, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Just as a point of reference, God willing, on Tuesday of this coming week, I believe it's Tuesday of this coming week. Let me just double check. Hold on, stop recording.